best-selling author, and he's also leadership consultant. His latest book is this, Moose on the Table, a novel approach to communications at work. Jim Clemmer, thank you so much for coming in today. And let's talk a little bit about the book and what exactly Moose on the Table means, because I don't think we see any moose around here.
Well, I didn't see any on the way in here.
Yeah.
It's a metaphor that, similar to the elephant in the room, it's an issue that's sitting on the table. Maybe a team is in a meeting and they're avoiding it. They're not dealing with it, they're ignoring it. And of course, it's getting in the way, it's slowing down productivity or effectiveness of the team. So we've used that metaphor for a number of years to talk about how can we address the moose on the table and get rid of the moose.
And this happens everywhere. It happens with friendships, it happens with relationships and in the workplace like we're speaking about today.
Absolutely.
How common is it in the workplace?
It's a very common thing, and I've been using the metaphor with groups I've been working with for about 8 or 10 years, and people have really connected with it. I've a number of clients who have bought little stuffed moose or cardboard cutouts of moose that they have around the table, and they really use the playfulness of it to try to get more of those conversations going.
Exactly. So maybe it's a serious subject, but maybe you can realize that it's just not quite as serious as you think. And you've done a good job at, well, a different idea you had is you wrote this novel, it's actually fiction, so that it's more of a story, again, going with the playfulness of the
Exactly.
idea.
And I've tried to use a lot of humor and a few twists and turns and really continue to play with the idea. Pete Leonard, the central character in the book, actually starts seeing moose in the office. He gets gored by one at one point. But again, it's playing with the idea and using it as a way to open up conversations.
Right. Okay, well, we're going to come back after the break and we're going to discuss what you guys can do at work if you have some of these issues as well. So stay with us for more communication after the break.
I've been retired now for 10 years, but I think for women it's climbing that up to the top when you have challenges of a home and children.
Not getting so much appreciation for what you do. Like if you do hard work, no appreciation for it.
Maybe doing a job that you don't love. I think that that's a huge one, and I really think that people should look for something that they love to do and that they're passionate about, and I think that will probably help to alleviate some of the other problems that they have.
Welcome back to HelpTV. Today's show is all about communication. We're trying to help you communicate with the people you work with just a little bit easier and a little bit better. And Malcolm, what are some challenges you think that people face in the office?
Well, there's a lot. I think, long hours, especially now that so many people are putting in, overtime, there's downsizing and so forth. And if you want to spend time with your loved ones, if you want to have time for, you've got children at home, whatever else, or if you've got outside activities, it can really take a bite out of life. So folks have to find that, and as long as that balance, and hopefully you work with managers who don't just say, oh, and by the way, you're staying until 11 tonight.
Yeah, exactly. And I love what you were talking about with your guest over there and how he said shut up and how it means different things to different people. When I was playing volleyball in Germany, the people that we were playing with, we'd say, us girls, oh, shut up. And they're English, they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Because to them, obviously, they think we're telling them to be quiet when we're like, really?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I mean, that is one of them that definitely you should be careful about.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so I'd like to get back to my guest now. Jim, let's talk about, we mentioned how important communication is in the office and how big of a problem it is, but with all this technology and Blackberries and email, you would think it's starting to get easier. So what are people afraid of when it comes to proper communication?
Well, it is ironic, I think, that we're in the communication age and we have all this technology available, and yet communication is getting worse in a lot of ways. And why that is pretty complicated, but I think it's really 3 key pieces in many workplaces. Part of it might be a skill or a behavioral issue that individuals just aren't comfortable raising an issue, talking with an issue, or talking to an issue in a way that doesn't raise defensiveness and doesn't get the other person perhaps into some kind of conflict. I think a second part of it is the culture of an organization. That's a major component where some organizations are very open, transparent, people can talk about just about anything, and you feel comfortable in doing that. In many organizations, unfortunately, that's not the case. And managers have found various ways to sort of send the message to say, we want you to think this way. We want you to believe these sorts of things.
Well, and then it gets kind of confusing. If you never know where you stand or what's kind of happening, then you don't know. One day you're doing the right thing, the next day maybe you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
In your book, you talk a lot about fear and how important it is to have the courage to step up and deal with issues. So why are you encouraging people to rock the boat when maybe it's just easier not to talk about something and just, you know, just to let it happen and eventually it'll go away? Because a lot of people don't have personalities where they want to be confrontational about the issue and just get it over with.
Well, it doesn't have to be confrontational. It's really, and it may not be that at the meeting right there where the moose is on the table is the time to talk about it. Maybe that's not appropriate. Maybe afterwards I need to have a quiet conversation with someone, or I need to talk to perhaps a couple of colleagues, and we together try to figure out how to go after the moose. So it doesn't have to be confrontational, but I think the fear issue is that if we're either part of the problem or we're part of the solution. There really isn't an in-between place here. So if I'm not doing something to help address the moose, then I'm actually enabling it or saying it's okay to stay, bring your buddies, have some babies, and let's have more moose show up.
Exactly. But sometimes you think that employees are looked upon if they're bringing up issues and maybe they're just whining or complaining about something, and then they feel like it's a detriment to their future of their career?
Yeah, and that's a tricky one, because sometimes that is the case. Sometimes people are being very negative and whiny about something. But at other times when people are raising issues, we need to maybe, hopefully managers will probe a little deeper and try to understand what's really going on there. And as well as when someone is raising an issue, so if you as an individual see something that needs to be addressed, it's all about how you frame it and present it. So if you're coming across as whining and complaining and just harping on the problem, you'll get a very different response than if maybe you come across with presenting the problem and then some solutions, ideas, things, suggestions that you might make to try to make things better.
That makes absolute sense. Okay, well, when we come back with Jim, we're going to talk about the actual cost that there is to businesses, how much money you're losing if there's this moose on the table. But right now we're going to go see Kim. Jim Clemmer, author of Moose on the Table, and when we left off last, we were just about to reveal the cost to organizations of poor communication.
Well, and they're varied and they can be massive. They can be huge. Everything from people actually dying.
Well, stress related.
Well, stress, but even with health and safety issues. We work with a number of organizations where there's a phrase that comes out of this work, normalization of deviance. People do workarounds, people ignore safety rules, people don't do what everyone is supposed to be doing. And it may be because there's some big issue there that's not being talked about. So it can have that kind of cost, or it can certainly have costs, very big costs in productivity, in quality, in customer service levels. And these days, many managers are concerned about attracting and retaining and hanging on to really good people. And so if you've got a workplace full of moose running around where people are getting more and more frustrated and there are more and more taboo topics you can't talk about and your manager's not very approachable and so forth, and another opportunity are the headhunter calls.
Yeah,
see you later.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about actually instilling the change. A lot of managers will talk the talk when it comes down to doing something. Maybe they're lacking in that area. So how do they bridge that credibility gap with their employees and let them know that actually something is going to happen?
Well, yeah, that is key. And in fact, Pete Leonard, the character in Moose on the Table, takes a weak attempt at first to deal with some of the moose, and he actually makes the situation worse. And so if you raise issues and you raise expectations and you get people starting to talk about problems, but then you don't follow through and don't do something with that, you've just made the situation worse. Absolutely. You'd be better off not to have done anything at all in the first place. So even something as simple as many times people will be asked their opinion, say, in a survey, an organizational survey. And then maybe the management group will take that information, they'll go off and they'll work with it and they'll perhaps make some changes, but it might take a month or 2 or 3 till something changes, but they don't make the connection back to what the input people gave. And so 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, there are some changes being introduced, but the connection's not there, so I think that you didn't use my opinion.
Yeah, and then it just, I know what you mean. Okay, well, it says in your book, when change fails, it can almost always be traced to dysfunctional leadership. Now, is that a failure to the leader's self or to the leader's people that it manages?
Well, I guess it's a broad look at the whole notion that the effectiveness of any organization is very much dependent upon the quality of the leadership that's being provided. And leadership, I think, comes from leadership has two components. There's the inner dimensions of leadership, so I lead from the inside out. And in that sense, everybody needs to be strong leaders throughout the organization. And then there's the outer dimensions of leadership, how I develop and coach and bring my team forward. And so in less effective organizations, leadership is typically something that's talked about a lot, but as we just said, isn't really followed through, doesn't really happen to a strong degree.
You get busy and things happen, and it just kind of seems like something may get left to the wayside. So then how do managers deal with staff, especially going through tough times? Corporations are having these right now. Staff who would rather just up and leave with tough times instead of staying and sticking it through.
Well, that again illustrates the importance of communication and openness, so that people feel engaged, connected, and there's a sense of partnership. So that it's not a we-they gap between us as management and they as the workers, or vice versa. And how can we get everyone feeling like this is our team, this is our organization, these are our products, these are our customers. And that is at the heart of the whole leadership issue. And so in a nutshell, I often ask, well, how do you motivate people? How do you get people engaged? And I think that that's sometimes exactly the backwards way to approach it. The other way to approach is to say, well, what's demotivating people? What's turning people off? What's causing people to leave? And so if I ask those kinds of questions and I find what that is, then I can ideally get people involved in trying to fix those problems, deal with those most.
Well, because motivating people, and you can actually form this loyalty. We're gonna stick it through because we can do it, because this is our team, and we're not gonna take these tough times. You know what I mean? That sort of energy would be wonderful. Okay, well, we have more coming up in just a little bit. Something I don't think any of you at home can relate to: bad bosses. We'll see you after the break. Stay with us. And we're back with Jim here, and we're just about to start talking about bad bosses. So what are some common types of bad bosses?
Well, I wrote in the book a bully boss that Pete Leonard, the central character, has. I guess a lot of times bad bosses come from either insecurity and bosses that are fearful. Generally, that kind of boss is blustery, is autocratic, is demanding, and is bullying.
Right.
And then I think they're the bosses that are really neglectful. They really don't understand perhaps what their leadership role is or should be. And then there are distracted bosses who are so caught up in the day-to-day, just answering their emails and just dealing with a
trying to put all
flood
the
of
fires.
things. That they're highly reactive and they're not terribly proactive. So I think one of the key things for all of us, whatever type of boss we have, is not to be a victim of an ineffective or certainly a bad bully boss, but to say, well, what can I do to maybe influence, to work around, to move forward and be a leader despite whatever kind of leadership I may be getting from my boss.
Right, so you don't necessarily have to leave your job. You don't have to quit. You can actually deal with it if you have a bad boss.
Yeah, I think that should always be step number one, is what can I do to try to work around or influence or deal with a bad boss. But eventually we may have to leave. I've done that in my past, where it just became clear to me that not only did I have a bad boss, but the kind of values that seemed to be at work in the broader organization that would even put that boss in place in the first place were values that I wasn't really in alignment with.
I know I've read one time the number one bad boss in this particular article was a boss where you never know where you stand. One day they love you, the next day you think they hate you, and you're kind of this insecurity is being forced upon you because you don't ever know if you're doing a good job or a bad job.
Yeah, that's very true. And most of us want to know how we're doing. We want that feedback. And ideally, we'd like some direction, what the priorities are, what the goals are, etc. But in the absence of getting that, again, too many times people will sit back and will say, well, my boss never tells me anything, or I don't get the information I need. And then they'll kind of sit back and arms folded and say, I'm not going to do anything until I get that.
Problem. It's the world's problem. I haven't done anything, and the world just is messing up all around me and not suiting myself.
And that's to be a victim. That's to spend too much time in pity city and feeling sorry for yourself. To be a leader, regardless of what your position or role is to go get the information you need, go find out what has to happen, go set some priorities, take that initiative, and make it happen yourself.
We're running a little bit short on time. If you could give the viewers at home kind of just the one thing that stands out in your book that you would tell them if you're dealing with communication issues, what would that be?
Well, I think it is the central theme of the book is fear versus courage, and how often we allow fear to take over and silence us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here today. If you'd like more information on the book, you can find it all at helptv.ca. It's available at any bookstores and mooseonthetable.com.
Yes, it is.
Yes, excellent. Thanks so much for coming in today, Jim.
Thank you.
So did you learn a lot about the topic today, Jay?
I did, and did you?
Yes, absolutely, and really, really neat guests, and I suppose it's logical that they should all be very good at communicating, you know,
Yeah.
given the topic. So it is really nice to know that there are folks who are doing this critical work, which really can improve a lot of workplaces, and if you own a business or if you work in one, you know, there's definite opportunities for improvement.
And even going further past that, I happen to think that a lot of problems that happen in this world and relationships and family are due to communication issues. So not even only in your workplace, but implement in other places as well. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you on Monday for Fraud.
Absolutely, and we really mean it too.